Chris picked up a pencil. They began sketching what they had seen behind the tree. But as they sketched, the line began to err, as if the pencil had lost its way. So they started again, drawing over the lines they had already made. Many times they would suddenly halt, or the pencils drifted into a new drawing. So they started over again. Through many repetitions, their movements became faster and smoother, until, without looking, they had completed a sketch in a single wild line. In the end, as a result of layering the sketches on top of each other, the surface of the canvas was nothing more than a monochrome smear. Next, a tree was painted over it, painted over everything, leaving nothing more but a simple still life. After all, there wasn't anything to look at in the room besides a single tree. An egg was picked up from a nearby easel. It's a sink. You ran water over your hands and dried them. Between your fingers, a faint gray crease glittered stubbornly. Analysis, by its very nature, requires a certain level of disconnect. Taking a step away from something to get a better angle, a better perspective. Seeing the bigger picture, as people say. And, when presented as a whole, you notice things that you didn't before. Patterns. However, pattern recognition does not necessarily mean that there is a pattern. You're just recognizing something that might be one. Keyword, might. In the end, we are but observers, witnesses to something that is unraveling and becoming. Still, analysis is important, because regardless of everything being shown, being said, everything being presented on the screen of pixels or cathode ray tubes, you are presented with the undeniable fact that someone is trying to tell you something. In my first video, Mastering Foreshadowing, I wanted to take a look at how Toby Fox foreshadows plot points, how he goes about setting the narrative importance of this or that, and how it pays off. It was about the Chekhov's guns that were placed down, and who they will be shot at. And now, we have it. The third episode, the fourth fate, the new chapters of Deltarune. Which leaves us with the question, how does it hold up? Starting off with one that is a little bit of a precarious situation is the matter of the library debt. In my first video, I suggested that later chapters we would gain more money so that we could build up and pay the library debt that Asriel has accumulated for how to draw dragons. Since chapter 3 was entirely a dark world, I assumed that in chapter 4 we would get $20. Unfortunately, in chapter 4, we can only get 15 off from the expected amount. Plus, there's the whole diner scene. We get together with Susie, spend some money, and have a really touching scene with her. Unfortunately, it does seem that my original assumption was incorrect with the $20. However, we are still at the halfway point of the game, still have 3 more chapters to go, and there are still multiple chances of getting more money in future chapters. Despite how good the diner scene is, it is only optional. Honestly, I'm kind of confused that despite everything about how to draw dragons, it never really came up. Like, that was the one thing I kind of expected at least a mention of too, but no, never really got there. But to be completely fair, I never expected this to be immediately fired by chapter 4. I suspected it would be accumulatory, meaning that you would get little by little for each chapter, so that it's something that you can only fire near the end of the game. So, until we reach chapter 7 and the game is complete and we have every opportunity to get money and there is not enough to get it, this really can't be considered debunked. Only on hold, so to speak. And before you ask, yeah, I know how that sounds. Oh, there's no evidence yet, but there will be evidence in the future. I know. It sounds a bit contrived. But at the same time, calling it now while there's still time for build-up is jumping the checkoff. Moving on to something else, however, we have Onion. Onion said that they heard a song in the ocean. Normally this wouldn't be much, but considering how much Deltarune put a lot of emphasis on music and motifs, and time signatures now. Regardless, the importance of music in Deltarune cannot be overstated. So when Onion said that they were going to appear tomorrow, it's a good chance that they were going to learn more about it. And luckily, Deltarune Romado came, so what did Onion have to say?
Motherfucker stood us up.
Yeah, so when it came time to pay child support, Garlic ditched us in hop states, and is now probably in the Philippines. Let me guess, they'll come back in chapter 5 and say gaslighting us into thinking that they don't know how days work or something. It's not my fault, sweetie, it's yours for not telling me. Whatever. Point is, Onion never showed up. Only this dude, the penguin who wants us to read the books upstairs. Even at night, nothing showed up. Until... She can hear it. She can hear the song that plays at night, coming from the other side of the lake. We can't hear it. Chris can't hear it, but she can hear it. Makes me wonder, can we get Susie to play the song? Can we get a snippet of what she heard? Some people say that they can actually hear a song, thinking Lost Girl, but others say that they can't. It might be a situation of people hearing things that aren't there, cause I can't hear it, honestly. So while Shallot forgot to tell us, Susie is a bit more reliable in finding out what the song is, cause there was the whole thing about the bells of justice that the old man mentioned. Could be a cool line about justice, yes, but the thing about saying, "Do you hear the ringing?" to the one person who did hear the song just rhymes. You get me? So while Onion is a no-go, I can say that this has been built up. So, while we have one that is being put on hold and one that is pretty much built up, now we move on to something that is really fucking funny. The next one was my prediction of the secret boss. So while others were thinking about flowers or others were talking about the Stinky Pete from the story, my suggestion was the knockoff controller under Asriel's bed. So, now that we have the new chapters, who was the boss that gave us the Shadow Crystal?
Hatsune Miku!
Yeah, after all the candidates who were pointed to for the secret boss, I don't think anyone thought it would be Paul Blanc from Malcom. So, on paper, this should be debunked. Except, alright, I'm gonna be a little bit pedantic with this one, but the real secret boss for Chapter 3 is the game we play in the S-Rank room. Because it's actually a secret. You can go about the game and not enter there. To play the game, though, we need a controller, and when we leave the room, we find one. An odd controller that no one wanted to use. I think we all know which one is being referred to. That is what we use to play the game. That is how we get the Shadow Mantle, something that makes fighting the knight possible.
Deltarune roaring night and no yet.
No harrowing night in 7 turns.
Bullying the Roaring Club.
Roaring Frog considers retiring after being beaten by weakest palsy.
Yeah, eat shit, asshole.
I would like to personally thank Deltarune for the guide of how to defeat the folding chair. Even though it wasn't the boss itself, the knockoff controller was an integral part of getting the Shadow Mantle, so I think I can take the W on this one. Especially after some people gave me shit for thinking about that. The knockoff controller was video game themed, not TV themed. My brother and Angel, you plug the controller into the thing. So, yeah, pretty damn close, but close enough. Now, for something I am a little less confident in now, the glow shards. So when I made the video, there were only 2 instances of glow shards being out there. The first one is being off to the side in the cliffs area, and the second being the UFO room in Queen's Palace. So, what of the new chapters? Well, for Chapter 3, there's this gumball machine that gives you random items, and for Chapter 4, nothing. However, you can get multiple glow shards from the gumball machine, but at the same time, you can also just not get it out of bad luck, so the glow shards may not actually be that important at all. You can't see my logic though. In a game about light and dark, and having 2 items called glow shards and shadow crystal, one of them being hard to get though, I thought there may have been something there. However, nothing came up. I even tried using them during the spawns in the Titan fight, and nothing happened. I don't know, I feel like there's a missed opportunity there with the Titan fight. Considering your soul is glowing is the whole mechanic, and having an item that is described as glowing, maybe I'm just putting too much stock in an item that may have just only existed to be sold for cash money. Long story short, I'm going to consider this one put on the shelf for now. Maybe in something in 5 will change my mind, but for now, I'm not going to put too much stock onto this anymore. But one thing I can say that I was just straight up right about was Susie's healing. This is one of the things I just straight up hit the nail on the head. It's even extended more to Susie's character art. She grew a lot as a person in Chapter 4. God, she's such a good character, to be honest. Even with the Titan fight and her and Rouse using their healing spells together to max out the team's health, genuinely great. And the best part, I didn't even think that this is the end of it. But I'm gonna leave that door open for a bit. Next up is Dragon Blazers. And honestly, I can't exactly claim credit for this, because it was an idea that was floated around, but Dragon Blazers being an analogy for Deltarune as a whole. Which was even more correct than honestly I expected, because we thought that there was just going to be 1 or 2 things that would correlate, but no. The entire plot of Dragon Blazers is based on Lord of the Hammer, which is inspired by the prophecy. yes, Lord of the Hammer was also important. I don't really recall anyone saying that, but I know some people were saying that Chapter 4 was going to be Lord of the Hammer and the Church, which I also suspected Chapter 4 being the Church, but then again, who didn't? But Lord of the Hammer being inspired by the prophecy is really a game changer, especially since we got snippets of the plot from that, but more on that later. So, yeah, another thing dead right. Alright. Now time to talk about the final prediction of the video. In the last segment of my first video, I laid out my cards on the table and revealed that my candidate of who I thought the knight was Chris. Considering a lot of factors of the reveal looked premeditated, I was convinced that they were the knight opening the fountains. Well, Chapter 3 and 4 came out, and looks like we now know who the knight is. So insofar as things look, Chris Knight was wrong. But at the same time, we are also still correct, because even if they aren't the knight, they are objectively working with the knight. They are a collaborator. They know the codes to the shelter. They are keeping others in the dark. They wouldn't strike at them when given the chance. They were the ones being knighted by the knight. We were still correct in suspecting Chris. And that was the thing that really bugged me, how everyone took the ending of Chapter 2 and just completely disregarded it. It turns out the big reveal was a big reveal. Chris is not our ally. They didn't end up being the very thing we were thinking they were, but that wasn't what people were saying about Chris. Everyone was making argument that Chris is actually an innocent blorbo who opened the fountains because they wanted to have some fun with their friends. Completely ignoring the fact that they slashed their mom's tires to accomplish this, and they also actively put their mother in danger, and they knew that. They went on to make a deal with Tenna to keep Toriel asleep, but that doesn't change the fact that their mother was endangered. Even ignoring that this still happens after the weird route. Like, there is no way these actions can be seen as innocent, and they weren't. But they aren't exactly capital T, the knight. Even if I was wrong in that, I still feel completely satisfied with what I got in the end. I wanted Chris to be a morally questionable character. I didn't want him to be the sad, innocent little meow meow everyone was convinced they were. And they are fighting back against us, and now everyone is arguing if removing the autonomy of an angsty teenage meat puppet is actually a good thing, which is what I wanted. Everything that made Chris Knight interesting is still here, and thriving. Even if the main point of the theory turned out wrong, everything else holds true. However, I do also get the feeling that people will take that segment and add soy jacks and pepes and say, oh, cope, I'm coping, I'm huffing copium, or something like that. Like, am I not allowed to feel pride for being almost correct? When I see people talk about how they got everything wrong, am I allowed to take credit for things that were accurate? But at the same time, I can completely look at that mindset and see that essentially being the lines of, oh, I was actually right all along, I just need to change this word to this word and that word to that word, and pretty much the same sentence,
Oh, my brain!
However, this does also boil down to the fact that we shouldn't be all about who was right or who was wrong. Like, there's the pride aspect of it, yes, but honestly, in the end, we shouldn't really be worried about that. This is not a quiz of who was right or who was wrong. This is us trying to listen to Toby, asking ourselves, what are you trying to tell us? What are the words he is putting out that we need to read and listen? Except for my Ralsei analysis. My analysis of this character pretty much is the most accurate out there. I was dead right about the scapegoat metaphor. Everyone will now bow to me like I'm some kind of fluffy boys. Oh, right, my follow-up video. I already talked about Onision, and maybe there's Gaster or something, I don't know. We were dead wrong about Caddy being in the new chapters, and I feel robbed, but maybe she'll get her time to shine, and Jokington. But it is fated in prophecy that Jokington will grow the beard. However, they might also not show up, because, let's be real, he already has a beard. She's his school partner. Bulldog. He is in the pipes. That is all. Still no sign of the Goner, but honestly I didn't expect them to either. I was hoping this would appear in Chapter 3, but there are still some hints here and there. I'm thinking that it might actually fully manifest in Chapter 5 now. Not only that, but the Heal Prayer and Ultimate Heal combined into a dual heal, so I can expect Susie combining Rude Buster in his fire spell into something too. Rude Blazer. Finally, the prophecy. Self-explanatory. No. Really. Everything has been set up for the prophecy following through. Their fates are unfortunately sealed. However, my claim that our attempts of subverting the prophecy with a weird route and making something far worse is also looking pretty good. So, with all that said, it's time to put the guns lined up on their respective shelves and take a moment and listen to the bells being chimed. What melody are they playing? Starting with Chapter 5, and the place that is pretty much perfectly shaped for the role of its Dark World, Flower King. I can't really call this a theory because the game literally spells it out for us, and it's going to be that. The garden, as Gerson mentioned, the Flower Man and Asylum, and the fact that this place pretty much has the double doors cocked and loaded since Chapter 1 waiting to go off. Originally my thoughts were that Chapter 5 was going to be the hospital, and Flower King was going to be 7. I will put those thoughts in the dead wrong box. Chapter 5 is going to be Flower King. There is no debating this. However, what will Chapter 5 be like? Well, we have comic books in Asgore's room and a conspiracy board in the basement, and Asgore was the police chief. Susie will probably try to find out if he might have some codes for the shelter, so I can definitely see this coming through, like a detective noir chapter in a flower shop. Detective Pastel. Cottage detective? Hang on a minute. Flower shop with bright colors, a conspiracy, dingy interior with economic decline, and a police officer who is the most divorced man of all time. Are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? That's right, baby! Chapter 5 will be Disco Elysium! Get your tequila sunsets and shivers all over the place! That's what I think about Flower King. Asgore's asylum, so to speak. Now, the word asylum has multiple meanings, and I think that there's a good chance that one definition comes to mind for most people. So, to be general, asylum simply means a place for people to take refuge in and seek protection. People will seek asylum in other countries if they feel like they aren't safe in their own. However, the image of a mental institution has muddied the reception of that word. That being said, I feel like there's a good chance both meanings apply here. A lot of people sort of pity Asgore to a certain extent. There's a dialogue with this NPC talking about how it's a shame he got into that sort of thing, as well as being the topic of gossip in the church, as well as the corkboards on the wall in both the basement and this room in the Holiday Manor. Asgore has gotten into a conspiracy theory, and to be perfectly fair, he's kind of right to be. 'Cause, there is genuinely a conspiracy going on. A conspiracy that the mayor is behind, the church is behind, and the police is behind. Oh my god. That's why we could tell Undyne about the Dark Worlds. Because she already knew. She was lying. Does she know about Chris's involvement? If she does, then did she lie because they were in public and didn't want others to listen? Or because she knew that somebody was listening? Back to Asgore. I feel like with all of that, he would know that Dark Worlds are real. So, yeah, if I was in his situation, I would fall down a conspiracy rabbit hole Now, the important question is, if we do get a chance to see what the board looks like, will it be, comprehensible? Like, how much of it is genuine analysis to glean information from, and how much of it will basically boil down to Srendin Daifme? He knows that Dark Worlds are real, probably for years now, and he may have a grasp of the concept better than most people, though overconfidence is a slow and insidious killer. Not to mention, there are some people who are trying to muddy the waters, as well as the fact that the very people providing help to him are the same people who may want to keep this secret hidden. There is a saying about keeping your enemies closer, isn't there? But that's all I have to say on Asgore. For now. While we're still talking about Flower King, I think now is a good time to bring up the egg rooms. On Sunday, he harvests wheat. Hold your breath, head to the left, and count backwards to 100. This is making me think that there might be an underwater section in the Dark World, with the hold your breath part. But the whole thing requires a bit of patience in general. The strongest persevere with patience, as they say. As for the wheat field, well, I think it will be a matter of we will know when we see it. But I think now is a good time to bring up the fact that, holy shit, I didn't expect Deltarune to go full Lynchian in some segments, but Jesus Christ, Toby isn't playing around anymore. We aren't dealing with metaphors anymore, we're dealing with straight up enigmas. The whole room, between a room, emulated secret video game glitches. The man country literally being a Game Boy level, and the art therapy room representing multiple times we play the game. It's growing harder and harder to understand, but we must understand. The purpose of an egg is to hatch. There's also the whole element of the Chapter 4 egg room, which I'm just going to dub Nowhere for now. In Nowhere, it's an art therapy room. Art is a good way of processing emotions, making you try to come to terms with trauma. However, the thing that really gets me is the fact that Chris tried to draw the man. Chris tried to draw what was behind the tree, but in the end, they painted over with a tree as if to block the memory. Memories of a man, memories of roots, memories of smiles, memories of an egg, of birds. The birds are softly singing. So much can be said about this. So much does this tell us about Chris that I'm honestly still trying to unpack it all. So in the meantime, I think I'm just going to leave this for my Chris analysis in the future. No tree can grow to heaven till its roots reach down to hell. Back to this bird from before. In the previous chapters, we've seen them stand at the door, telling us to read the books upstairs. However, they're rather large, so we can't exactly get around them. Very large guy wants us to do something and not realizing they're blocking away, slaps me on the knee. In chapter 2, we do get up there, but only read a small amount, still blocking us. Then chapter 4, things take an odd turn, to say the least. In the previous chapters, they seem to be not exactly the sharpest knife, but that moment in chapter 4 seemed like they had a moment of lucidity, like they were pulled out of a trance. This would be interesting for just an NPC in general, but this isn't any NPC. This is one of the fun event NPCs in Undertale. One of the Gaster followers. Even later, when we had the chance to see if Onion was still out, they were also there, telling us to don't wait, especially the don't. Strange things are happening, and don't get me started on the fact that the other two followers were absent this chapter. Still, we have the one that blocked our way of learning the truth, so we should still look out for the man trapped in the road, incapable of moving forward, and the one trying to send a message to someone. In Chapter 3, there's a gumball machine that, if you put a very specific number into, you get a secret event. There's a chest. Chris opens the chest and there's a wooden Deltarune, but it falls onto the floor. It falls from Chris's hand, and then we realize Chris can't see their hand. If we put together Chris seeing through their hand with the shadow crystals, a connection to be made that Chris might lose their hand in the future. Considering the prophecy, the future might have its way of bleeding through, especially through things that might seem to reside at the very edges of fate. As if losing control was enough, they're also going to lose a part of their body that gives them the ability to control a hand. Looks like they might not be able to play piano much in the future. Speaking of codes, 1225, certainly one of the codes in the bunker. I mean, it's a thing written on the guitar, so we can make a logical assumption that the last number is 5. But those aren't the only codes. 1225 was one of the codes to get tutorial in Chapter 3, but there was another one, 213. 1225 is the passcode for the mayor's key. I think 213 is the police's code. Asgore was a police chief, and that was his house, so the code would absolutely linger on there, like an important memory. That leaves the church. They tried to find some codes in Chapter 4, but couldn't, until the fire extinguisher told them, really making him the most important character in that entire chapter, honestly. The code was for the lock leading to the church, yes, but considering that they did investigate the church and found nothing for that lock, let alone the codes for the shelter, I think code for that lock is the same code for the shelter. 1225, 213, 2202. We have them. We quite literally have the answer to the mystery right in front of us. All we need to do is tell Susie, which is the hard part, since someone is making that a bit difficult. But Chris has been slowly learning ways of communicating despite us, going against our choices to try to undermine us and say their own thoughts, taking opportunities of freedom when they can. So, why can't we learn from them? Is there a way that we can try to tell Susie without Chris? Is there a way for us to skirt the problem and truly tell her what we want to say? I've been seeing a lot of people point out in this chapter that Susie was really the protagonist of Deltarune. Not only her character arc being phenomenal in both chapters, but also showed a great amount of growth and kindness, taking on the role of the traditional hero. But not the protagonist. Protagonist is the leading character of a story, the point of view that drives and progresses the plot. Chris is the protagonist, but Susie is the hero. At least, that's the case so far. To point out another video I made, we've had a lot of times where we've gone to Susie's perspective. A thought has been brewing in the back of my head. The possibility that, in the future, we might possess Susie and make her a protagonist. Considering how the game has moved to her perspective multiple times, how she's been making more game mechanics, and changing everything around her and avoiding the pitfalls, taking an active approach. Plus, Susie has seen the soul now. She knows we exist. She will ask Chris about it. She'll want answers. So, doing this could be a way of telling her about everything. Another thing, in Chapter 3, there's a whole thing about the key being under the cactus, one of the keys to escape. Now, this is the Dreamer House. What do we know about the Dreamer House? That there is a locked room and a cactus. We never really got the chance to see what was inside that room at all. Not even in Chapter 3, where the whole of Dark World was the Dreamer House. We probably got the chance of the locked room metaphor within Toriel, but we haven't seen the real thing. Is it possible that we can open this door in the future with a key that might be under a cactus? After all, the purpose of a door is to be opened. Makes me wonder why this door is locked specifically. It's not like Toriel used it while spawning the skeleton. Okay, but in all seriousness, my opinion of Toriel has kind of soured this chapter. Like, I don't want to be mean to her, but like, she seemed really neglectful. Last chapter we saw her making some worrying comments that gets even more worrisome with further context, but she did just party away all night while her child was facing the literal horrors. Like, I get it. She wouldn't have known, but she did see that someone slashed her tires the night before. I hoped she would at least have been a bit on alert. Maybe. At least she should have noticed that something was up with Chris. Hell, Asgore noticed things were wrong in the weird route. She was a bit tipsy, so maybe she just didn't have the ability to recognize it. Fair. I mean, good for her, I guess. Getting a funny bone man. This just isn't her best moment, I will admit. But it does also show a pattern of neglect. I just wish Chris may have just had a little bit of a better mother figure in there. Oh no, that's just evil.
I curse you! I curse you with balls full off disease! I give you lupus, not the werewolf one! You just have a wasting disease
No,
now.
Kevin! Do not castrate that man!